Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. Uh, these days, I've been really into studying the Vedic literature. It's amazing, you know. Uh, I remember hearing that. I guess the Shankaracharya, and I guess with a number of pundits, I would assume, I don't know. And they were talking about how, the children in India, a lot of them aren't really into the Vedic literature or their religion or anything. And they were talking about what to do about it. I may mention this in the previous podcast, but I have a different perspective on it now. Because I guess it was the Shankaracharya of the South, I guess, that said we should teach them Sanskrit. And when I heard that, see, I can either agree with that or disagree with that, but because I don't really know what he meant by it, I don't know if I should agree or disagree. But when I first heard it, I was like, well, they're not going to want to memorize Sanskrit. That's just a lot of work. And so I didn't think it was a good idea. And then now I'm thinking that it really depends on what he means by that, what level of understanding of Sanskrit would be taught. If it's just memorizing the vowels and the consonants and all of that, and trying to read it and learn the grammar and all that, kids aren't going to want to do it if they're not into Vedic knowledge in the first place. It's just going to be a bunch of work and struggle, and it won't interest them. But I guess, in a nutshell, I guess what I want to talk about today is a way of learning Sanskrit or studying Sanskrit or understanding, even just conceptually understanding Sanskrit, would be a fantastic field of study. And if not just children, not just kids, but if people, and not just Indians, but in the whole world, if people just understood what Sanskrit is, it would transform the earth. It really would. And people would become totally into it. And the notion of, even the notion of God, I mean, it would, the understanding would be so much deeper that there would cease to be any real debate about, all this stuff. Does God exist, or what is God, or which religion is right, or any of that. So it would just all go away. But it is an understanding, and it's not just an intellectual understanding in the sense that, I just have to use the analogy of, I can use music, I can use mathematics, but in arithmetic, in mathematics, there's one thing, to memorize how to do addition, and let's see, 2 + 2 = 4, and then before you know it, you can add bigger numbers, and then multiplication and division. And that's all well and good. Those are steps, but you don't really get the point. And I use that phrase, get the point, intentionally. You don't really get the point. You don't really understand mathematics until it's like you find it deep within your own being. You get the point. And so really knowing mathematics doesn't mean memorizing how much 2,586 divided by 7 is, but it's getting the point. It's getting the concept, it's understanding it. And in that sense, you become one with mathematics, It's the same thing with, music. I remember my daughter was learning to play the piano, and I really didn't care for the way that she was being taught. And that was, memorize the notes on the page, and then, okay, you hit those notes and blah, blah, blah. And then you go through this. And she'd go through it and she'd go through the first few lines or whatever, and then all of a sudden hit the wrong note, bam, 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 she'd be upset, normal. And then she'd start back at the beginning again and try to get through the thing. And it was all just memorization. To me, again, it's to find the music in yourself. And what does that mean? It's conceptual. It's getting the point. It's understanding, for example, what a chord is, and getting a feeling for what a chord is, getting a notion of a sharp or a flat and how that fits into the structure of chords, major and minor chords. And so there's a huge difference between memorizing, and again, in the case of Sanskrit, if it's about memorizing the letters, that's a turnoff. My daughter quit music. I really wanted to find a music teacher that taught it conceptually, taught it in a manner that is spontaneous, and if you hit the wrong note, it doesn't even matter, because you're one with the source of the thing, and you just glide through it. It becomes part of the interesting aspect of the song. But like that, with Sanskrit, understanding what it is, and so let's talk about that. And it may sound strange at first, I don't know, but really to understand Sanskrit, what Sanskrit is, I really think we need to start certainly with the kind of mindset and the mentality of humanity today, really. Let's start with Darwin. Darwin was talking about evolution of species and how of course, he was saying it's just random and survival of the fittest, and certain things come together and they're able to survive in the environment and reproduce, and so they do. And over time, through random chance, mutations, blah, blah, and finally you get something that's more evolved, and so because it's more evolved, it takes over. It's more fit, is what they say. And so slowly, through the years, you end up with a species that is called a human being. And it's just the process of evolution. Of course, now statistical studies, computer studies have shown that happen way too fast. That can't be it. And so what is it? What is going on there? Did evolution happen, and why did it happen so quickly? And the key there is that there's an underlying basis of existence, pure isness, pure oneness, the source out of which everything emerged. And so it's kind of like the foundation, and it feeds all of creation. And everything then is, because it's such a source of infinite harmony and intelligence and creation, it birthed the whole universe. And again, you can look at that from a mathematical perspective. Isness, which turns out to be pure consciousness, is the only thing that exists. Consciousness becomes conscious of itself, perceives it as other. You get two things. Consciousness becomes conscious of those two things. You get three, and then boom, 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 cascades out to infinity. That's just set theory, really. And so what happens then is that it creates an underlying structure. And that structure has an unbelievable amount of intelligence in it. I mean, it's so mathematically precise. It's so perfect. And it's the foundation to all the different systems of numbers, additions, and multiplication, calculus, the whole thing, the whole gamut, the whole spectrum of the whole field of mathematics. And like that, see, that's the beauty of the thing, is that in Sanskrit, what you have is the evolution of a species that embodies all of that intelligence and wisdom, not just in the thinking mind, but in the very physiology. So the physiology becomes the embodiment of all those laws of nature. And of course, that's a process. And where does the process culminate? It culminates with a species that is the full embodiment of the totality of all that knowledge, all of that intelligence. And again, it's physiological. It's not just that the mind gets it. That's a small part of it, really. It's that it's in the physiology from all levels, from the basis of existence, from the essence of a person's being, which in the Sanskrit language it's called Atma, to the very surface of life. The whole physiology, the blood chemistry, everything, it's born out of that. Janma, it's the birth of all of that. But now it's really interesting because and I've talked about this in previous podcasts, but we talked about the sequential unfoldment from unboundedness, pure isness, no thingness, represented by ah. It's one with ah. Well, what is ah? Fully open throat. See, it maps the whole linguistics. It's said that this is all born out of sound. It's called shruti. Shruti is sound. And as the underlying basis of all existence interacts with itself in mathematics, you go from no thingness, pure isness, pure consciousness, to consciousness aware of itself. You got two things that self interacts. And it's a dynamic that self interacts to create this whole underlying basis of existence. And that's all within the absolute. It hasn't even manifested yet. And we talked about that, I, U, and the vowel sounds. See, isn't that fascinating? The vowel sounds all come from fully open. There's no block to it. It's ah, e, oo, like that. The a, o, ahum. And it's all a flow. And that the flow, it has no edge to it. There's no corner. There's nothing to grab onto. It's not concrete. You see, it's unmanifest. And there we just went through those sounds, which are inherent in the nature and the structure of the physiology, you see? Because even within the absolute, there are three things, and these three things are so incredibly fundamental to everything. But the three things, let's take a look at it. You've got pure consciousness. That's the knower. That's called the rishi value. You've got the known, when consciousness looks at itself as other, kind of looks at it as a thing, if you will. That's the chandas value. But then there's a process there. There's a process of interaction, and that's called the devata value. Rishi Devata Chandas. And like that, see, it all maps so incredible. Everything maps. But onto the human physiology, because it's such an evolved species. It's a species that through evolution has culminated into a being that can embody the totality of that. And that includes the sound value, the articulation. It's in the throat, it's in the voice, it's in the mouth. And all those sounds are formed. You can see that Rishi Devata Chandas value right in the mouth itself. Goes to getting the point, the Atman, the Bindu point, the getting the point within your own being. I get the point. I am. Aham Brahmasmi. I am. I am the totality. That point value, just like within mathematics, you get mathematics and it contains the infinite field of all possible interactions of numbers. Like that, within the point value of the self, within the Atma of the self, it contains the totality of all possibilities that exist within unboundedness. And there's a whole mechanic to it. We talked about that in the previous podcast a little bit. But then to find that in the self, And then to find that in the physiology, and to find that in the formation of sound, Rishi Devata Chandas. The Rishi value in that sense would be the actual tissues in the mouth itself, where all the sounds are formed, you see? The tongue, the soft palate, the lips. And then there's the Chandas value. And remember, Chandas means like, it's so beautiful, you know. And that's why I like to try to relate it all to Brahman consciousness. I think it gives people a feel for it. I talk about the pillow. You can see a pillow. There's the pillow there. I'm looking at it right now. And there's an essence to the pillow. You see, in Brahman consciousness, Brahma Chaitanya, you actually see that point value of the pillow itself, that pillow is a bindu point. It is an atma. It is the one thing that is the source of the totality. Atma and ma back, atma. And you see that in the pillow. And so there's point values. And these point values are sources that reach out to the totality, but nevertheless, in another sense, like it says in the Brahma Sutras, you know, you can go back and forth. Is it just a pillow, or is it the essence of existence, or is it the totality? And then it all turns out to be the same thing. It's just a matter of choice, really, on that level. Am I making sense here, Scotty?
Right. No, you know, the way I'm seeing it is that you obviously you could pick any object and do that. It's just like
Correct.
you're looking at a rose and you see the leaf and then you see the bud of the rose, and then it goes down to where the stem of the rose is and the root of the thing and the gradient that, goes all the way down to where it interfaces with the
Yeah, you can you
manifestation.
can you
Yeah.
can you can see those mappings either, you know, vertically
Yeah.
or horizontally. You know, you
Right.
can look at it like, okay, that leaf is the one thing that's the source of everything. It maps. Or
Right.
you can look at it kind of like you're saying, Scotty. Another way is all the branches of the tree emerge from the root, emerge from the essence, which is ultimately just sap. And so it's all coming from the one thing that way. And everything. And can you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I say when a person first enters Brahma Chaitanya, it's not oh, everything's wonderful. I'm this enlightened being. No, it's mind blowing. You know, it takes getting used to, just like it says in the first Brahma Sutras. You know, it takes practice. It takes teaching, but teaching in a certainly in the sense of a good teacher, but also in the sense of life is the teacher, the perception is the teacher, the exploration of the whole thing. It's a teacher, you know.
Why do you think they, obviously this whole creation, however you want to talk about it, coming into being, like we as beings, we like wake up from being born and we look at the physical, and then it's almost like we forgot that transcendental. There's that gap in between. And is it like, you know, obviously when you've plugged in and you've you've permanently plugged into that transcendent, now you have all of that available to you, like what you were just talking about. Now
A
all of a
great
sudden you get into
question.
that, right?
It's a
And
great, it's a
why
really great,
why that? Why did they go through that process? Or
yeah. Well, boy, there's so much we could do with that. Physiology requires different levels of refinement. And those refinements, generally speaking, come from the depth, that source of inner perfection that's there. But that requires refinement. Just because you have a physiology doesn't mean it's functioning optimally. And if it's not refined enough, then all of that becomes, the deeper values become hidden. It's too refined. And so you perceive what you receive, you perceive on whatever level your current state of evolution, your current state of level of consciousness is capable of perceiving. And so if it's not really, really refined, you perceive the surface value. And then what happens is we start to navigate the waters of life based on what we're capable of perceiving. And so we create a very superficial understanding of life. And then we try to go deeper from there. But it's what is foundational, what we really hang our hat on. In that case, what we really tend to believe then is the surface. And we even see that in how we evaluate another person's level of consciousness, really. How good are they a player on the surface? And really, because you don't even perceive the depth, it's hidden, and Chundas value hides. You don't even perceive that depth. Oh, you have a sense of it. And it means everything to people, really. I mean, my life. I mean, it's the essence. It's who you are, But then again, it's perceived not real clearly as just a sense of divinity, a sense of God, a notion of oneness, that sort of a thing. So it's not a real refined, sophisticated, if you will, understanding of it, experience of it, but still it's strong. There was a interesting quote. I put it in the notes to the podcast. You can find it there. But it's like, love, such a powerful force. It's so powerful. We love our family. We love our children. We love our lives. But at the same time, it's so delicate. You see? And that's kind of the relationship that a lot of us have with spirituality, with God, with religion. It's such a powerful force. But it's such a refined thing that the level of understanding of it may not be all that sophisticated, but it's still extremely powerful. And if the understanding is too superficial, then, we get into these things. Well, does God even really exist? And we don't really associate the connection between the depth of our being and our oneness with God, So having said that, you can learn Sanskrit through memorization, and the pronunciation, you see, of the Sanskrit. The Sanskrit is the language of nature. It's the sounds that start with ka, which is, closed throat, thingness, ka, and it's all the consonant sounds. And so now once we get into that, now we're into the field of manifestation. It's no longer unbounded, a, e, u, o. But it has an edge to it. It has something you can hang your hat on. It's a concretion. And those concretions are now relative. They're more superficial. And that's really where people by and large live. It's give me the concrete, give me the thing, give me the objective facts in that sense. And so Sanskrit can be learned in that way. And then to get back to the structure of the mouth and the Rishi Devata Chundas thing I was talking about a minute ago, it ceases to have much to do with Rishi Devata and Chundas, and it's all just about how to pronounce a certain sound. And they're the different points from the back of the throat to the lips and along the palate, soft palate, hard palate, behind the teeth, between the lips, like that. And so now we have point values, Chundas, within the structure of the mouth. But then we also have the Devata value, which is the flow, the thing that connects. And that's kind of like how we speak. It's the movement of the tongue and the lips and the mouth. And so we see just one of an infinite number of examples of Rishi Devata Chundas, but as it applies now to Sanskrit, we see that it's the whole structure of the physiology that maps onto the very structure of existence, and sound being the foundation of existence. When you have the language of nature, which is Sanskrit, it just unfolds sequentially right out of pure isness. Then if we learn the language, even if we learn it on the surface now, even if we're not awake to the depth, now we're dealing with a surface value that has some correlation to the depth, even though we may not even know it. And the value of that then is because the whole process of evolution isn't just awakening to the depth, but it's having that well up through all the different levels of your being, all the different levels of your physiology, all the different levels of your awareness. So you're living and breathing it. You become the embodiment of it. And so working with the Sanskrit in that way can actually be something that facilitates your evolution. But then again, if you become dogmatic about, okay, this is it, and I get Sanskrit, and I'm a Sanskrit scholar, and I'm a Vedic scholar because I memorized all the verses of the Veda and stuff, that can actually become something that you're holding on to a superficial perspective of it, and it can actually inhibit moving past it because you've become so vested in your perspective on it. I think with Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, the course of action is unfathomable. Well, the Veda is also unfathomable. So what we're doing here is we can live in harmony with the unfathomable, but we can't grab onto it. We can't manhandle it. Am I making sense there, Scotty? It's like a dichotomy, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also, Michael, isn't this kind of like for the people that, are wondering, okay, what am I here for? You're here to, basically,
Another great point, Scotty.
right? Isn't this it?
To live in harmony with nature, to live in harmony. Harmony is
Right.
fulfilling. And it's even right out of the Brahma Sutras again. It's about finding that harmony in the surface. And when that harmony is fully known on the surface, then you see it as one with that pillow, and you see it goes either way. Is that pillow the source of the totality, which is infinite harmony, it's nature? Or is the infinite harmony within nature the source of the pillow? Back and forth. It goes both ways. And in a state of Brahman consciousness, take your pick. You look at that pillow is God. You look at that pillow is the one thing, the only one thing, the Atma, the one source, Bindu point, I guess they call it, the one source of the totality. Or is it an expression of the totality, and does the totality birth the pillow? It's both. And in Brahman consciousness and Brahman Chaitanya, that's just your experience. So now, when you learn Sanskrit, and you learn it in this way, with this understanding, then the Shankaracharya that said that, teach him Sanskrit, is so right. Why? Because understanding. If we understand something, really understand it, it becomes so beautiful, particularly something like Sanskrit, which is talking about the very stuff out of which the whole creation is built. It's so foundational to everything. And you see, now we have found a gateway to not only our own inner and outer fulfillment in life, living in harmony with nature, awakening to the divinity within us, seeing the integration between those things. But also, it's not just about that. It's about all existence. You understand how a tree grows? It's in the Veda. It's in that structure. There's a Rishi Panini, who cognized the foundation, a good portion of the what's called the Vedangas. The Vedangas, they talk about the Vedangas is all about. Well, a lot of people say it's all about grammar. It's all about language, and it starts, with the vowels and the consonants, and then you build and you build and you build, and it culminates in Jyotish. You go through the different steps to build the language, and then you see how that all comes back together, and then all the pieces fit together, and finally you get it, and you see the light, and that's Jyotish. But if you think that's just about Sanskrit and just about language in a very superficial sense, that you're missing the point. Because it's all sound. The whole universe is built out of sound. Sound is the only thing that exists. It's sound, that Shruti value emerges from the silent ocean at the depth of existence, Paran, wells up through the self-interacting dynamic, like the liveliness on the surface of the ocean. But see, there's a principle there called smrti, which is memory. Because as it wells up and then emerges into relativity, there's a thing, we know our roots in a very profound sense of the word. So we know the pieces, we live the pieces, but we directly experience how each of those pieces is connected to the infinite intelligence. Which is why, Newton said, if you understood but one grain of sand, you'd understand the universe. Then he said that about a vowel or a word or a letter. If you understood one letter of the Sanskrit alphabet, you would understand the totality of all existence. And in that sense, that's the way they say all the different branches of the Vedic literature. If you understood one of them, you get that it explains the whole totality. They're just approaching it from different angles, if you will. The different aspects of Vedic literature. And so now, I think, Scotty, with that understanding, now, if your kids really get that, and they have to get that, and that's just more exposure, it's like anything, when if you go about learning music the wrong way, you don't want anything to do with it, get through a few bars and then bang, 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 and start over. You're frustrated because you missed a note. But if you start to find music within yourself, and it can be taught in that way. 1, 3, 5, play a chord. It's just, wow, it's beautiful. And then the next chord, and then it all fits together. And you got music. And the same thing, you see the music in mathematics. You see the music in any field that interests you. And then you see how that relates. And you see how that is the Vedanga, that is grammar in the larger sense, or the whole language in the larger sense of the word. And then you start to sense more and more clearly the light, that thing you sense within yourself. Jyotish means light, And now you have a passion. And that can be a function of whatever field of knowledge you study, but the whole study of Sanskrit is so foundational to it, and it's physiological. And as you align your physiology with the very structure and nature of the foundation of your existence, it facilitates your evolution. I mean, they did a study of the different languages, and English is probably the language that's the furthest away from what's called a pure language, Sanskrit. And I am hopelessly American, for better or worse. And it has advantages and disadvantages. I'm just being a little flippant there. but I've learned, and it's going to be a journey. I mean, it's a journey, to learn to pronounce and to use and really to allow the physiology to be used in the way that it is divinely intended, if you will. The way it was structured, Rishi Devata Chandas, the whole way the mouth is, the hollow of the throat. That's where the breath comes from. That's the hollow of the throat is likened to Lord Shiva, pure isness, the absolute. And that's what then emerges out through the mouth and creates the sounds of nature. And so you start living in harmony with nature by your very speech. I know it is said that speech is your speech. Watch your speech. It's a very critical portion of your evolution. The evolutionary process is very dependent upon, certainly number one, what's number one? Meditation. Transcend, capture the fort, go into the absolute, awaken to the absolute. But facilitate its emergence through all the different levels of your being, to evolve in that sense, it's about speech. And we can watch our speech on different levels, even if we don't decide we want to learn Sanskrit. Even just watch how you talk,
Michael, is that how you use the Sanskrit? Is like, how do you use that as a tool to facilitate your evolution? Is it just
Well,
learning it? Is it
another great question, Scotty. Learning Sanskrit in and of itself, you're learning how to use the vocal cords and stuff. But even in the lips and the mouth and where to place the tongue and like that, and that's evolutionary. But even just, and can't be understated, listening to the Vedic recitations when done properly, and I don't recommend going on YouTube and listening to them chant the Veda when they put it to a beat and have. I mean, we're talking about proper. We're talking about the way the Vedic pundits would actually chant it. We're talking about the way it's done in the Sri Sameshwara temple here on a daily basis, and just listening to those impulses, it awakens that within the physiology, becomes a very powerful evolutionary tool. I would say the only other thing would be that I would consider more powerful is proper meditation. And again, go to Michael Mama's YouTube channel, and it's there. It's free. You can learn to do a meditation that does what? That allows the awareness to go to where it naturally wants to go, allows it to gravitate back to that field of pure isness, unboundedness, Atma.
back home?
What's that?
Back home.
Yeah, that's right, back home.
Yeah. And that's, I remember learning the sutras from you too, and and doing that in meditation as a level.
Yeah, there's the Yoga Sutras, which what does it do? It takes the pieces and kind of brings them together and starts to utilize them. It takes the Chandas value and starts to work with it to point in a direction of unification where you see the connection and you start to live the connection and breathe the connection between the sun and the galaxies, for example. And where does that lead? That leads to the next, and all these are different, Vedic chants that are of value to listen to. Karma Mamansa, that is the study of kind of like the understanding of the structure where the Yoga Sutras, where yoga leads, is that now the pieces are really coming together. And where does that ultimately culminate? It ultimately culminates in Vedanta, Jyotish, all the pieces. Okay, you get it now. This is all Brahman. This is all a totality. And so it's a whole process there. And so just listening to those Vedic chants are evolutionary, all the different branches, all the different aspects of Vedic literature. And again, this is really cool stuff. I could go on forever, I guess. But the different parts of the physical body correlate to different aspects of Vedic literature. You know, you've got the Vedangas, the Upangas, the Idihasas, the Puranas, the Brahmanas, blah, 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 on and on. But each of those relates to a different part of the body. I was talking to you about this the other day, Scotty, so that if there's a part of the body that is having a problem, by listening to that particular branch of Vedic recitation, what it does is it harmonizes that part of the body with the source of infinite intelligence and harmony and coherence that is the source of health for that part of the body, you see. And that's a technology, all that's going to come out. And it's not just about, again, the individual physical body. You want to learn how to do proper engineering of anything, how to build a car, how to build a flying machine, how to build anything. Foundational to that knowledge is knowledge of the Vedic literature, knowledge of the Veda. It's all within the Veda. Because you see, in the West, what we've done is we try to start at the surface and we identify with the surface and we try to derive deeper and deeper levels of understanding. And we've made some great progress. I mean, built a lot of great stuff, you know. But the other way to do it is to start with the foundation. Start with pure isness. Start with awakening to the Atma. And then through refinement of the psyche and the physiology and all that, it wells up through all the different levels of your being. And then just two more things I'll say. There's the chitta, the chit, which is the storehouse of impressions. And so what that does then, we think we're coming from our mind and our intellect and we get all this and we figured all this out, but largely all that is colored by the subconscious, the chit. And the chit tells us how we feel about things. We think we're deriving it or it makes sense, and we rationalize whatever it is we think whatever it is we're feeling. But it's really largely a function of the chit. And they talk about vritti. There are 5 modifications to a thought and a feeling and all that emerges right out of the depth of our being, and as it gets modulated, if you will. It gets affected, it gets altered, it gets determined. And of the 5 vrittis, really only one of them is good, meaning that only one of them is really modifications that come out of the union with divinity. And it births right out of that place of inner divinity. And so our thoughts then and everything are in harmony with nature. And the rest of them are spun by biases, indoctrinations, the chit, and that sort of a thing. Right now, I'm hugely into learning Sanskrit, and I am just a beginner because, you see, isn't it interesting that somebody who's born in Italy and finally learns English, they speak with an Italian accent pretty much the rest of their life? Why is that? It's because the muscles have been developed in a certain way. And then to learn Sanskrit, then different muscles need to be developed, muscles that we're not used to developing. And so to learn another language or to learn Sanskrit and to really get the pronunciation down, it's a process. It's a process and has a lot to do not just with understanding it, but with developing the actual musculature and how we use our lips and our tongue and all of that. Anyway, it's a wonderful study. I love it. I mean, it's so fascinated. Oh, one more thing. There was a Russian scientist who took a course in Sanskrit, and he was learning the vowels and the consonants, and in the way it's taught. See, there's a chart. It's actually a chart because the whole thing is so systematic. It's so mathematical, and they line up the different vowels and consonants in very precise ways. And he was looking at that, and here he is, a scientist, and he's looking at that structure, and he realized that the structure of the elements of creation, hydrogen, helium, iron, all that stuff, follow a similar structure. And so he created, based on that, he created the periodic chart. For those of you that know a little chemistry, the periodic chart of all the elements. And it just corresponds so beautifully. Why? Because we're talking about the language of nature here. We're talking about that, and it's born right out of pure isness, Atma. Akni Mile Parohitam. It's all right there. All right. I guess that's it, Scotty. Anything more?
It just seems like, as we start this process, and we become more stabilized with that, source, it does have effects on your physical existence as well, right? Because
It's the source of health. It's the source of integration. It's the source of life. If we had no connection with that, we wouldn't even be alive. And so, the key to healthier and healthier life, healthier and healthier mentality, healthier and healthier everything, better and better everything, is to harmonize more and more fully with that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely, Scotty. Yeah. This is the science of the future. This is the understanding of everything, the embodiment of everything, the enjoyment of everything. But right now, the global mentality is pretty much white knuckled to a superficial perspective. And as I say, echoes of truth, perceived as truth, hold truth at bay.
And it's
Which
all
is why we're building Mount Soma, why we're building this enlightened city, because it's going to radiate out that value to the whole environment, purify the environment. And as the environment purifies, people just spontaneously and naturally live more and more in harmony with nature. Living in a purified environment is hugely evolutionary for the individual. Huge, huge, unimaginably huge, really. All right, I guess that's it for this week. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk again next week.